When a person sees a stimulus, their eyes send an electrical impulse down a sensory neuron to the brain, which then sends an impulse down the central nervous system via motor neurons. This nerve impulse then travels along motor neurons. The impulse starts at the top of the axon and jumps over the myelin sheath, which insulates the axon by saltatory conduction. Each bare part of the axon is known as the nodes of Ranvier, and when the impulse moves, it is known as depolarization. At the end of the axon is the motor unit, which is a neuron and the muscle fibers it controls. Where the neuron ending meets one of the muscle fibers is known as a neuromuscular junction. This is where the impulse turns to ACH and is stored in vesicles. ACH is a neurotransmitter and diffuses over the synapse into the muscle fibers. If enough ACH makes it across the synapse, then the impulse will go down both directions of the muscle fibers instead of just one. This ACH is turned back into an impulse and travels down the T-tubules into the sarcoplasmic reticulum, which converts the impulse into calcium. The calcium then binds to the troponin, which pulls the troponin and the tropomyosin away to reveal the actin binding site. A cross bridge is then formed between the actin and the myosin and then performs a power stroke. ATP then binds to the myosin head, forcing them to disconnect. The myosin attaches to the nearest actin and continues creating a contraction until the impulse stops. For example, in netball, when the player is receiving a pass, the ball is the stimulus and will cause the muscles in the arms to contract in order to pass the ball. Large forces are generated because of the motor unit recruitment. A motor unit is a neuron and any endings it controls. A nerve can only control the muscle fibers it's connected to, and either all the muscle fibers contract or none of them do. In a motor unit, all the muscle fibers are the same type of fiber, and for gross movement it is likely to be the fast glycolytic muscle fibers that you recruit because they produce short, powerful contractions. The more muscle fibers you recruit, the bigger the force will be. Also, the larger the motor unit, the larger the force, because there will be more contractions happening at the same time. When a larger powerful force is needed as well as recruiting the fast glycolytic muscle fibers, you may need to recruit more than one motor unit to produce a contraction powerful enough. Lastly, slow impulses lead to less frequent, less powerful contractions. So by increasing the frequency, it will increase the strength and powerfulness of the contraction. For example, a weightlifter will need to recruit a high number of motor units containing fast glycolytic muscle fibers. To lift a heavy weight, they need to send fast, frequent impulses to the motor units to prevent injury and to allow them to lift the weight. However, a marathon runner will not need to use any fast glycolytic muscle fibers for slow continuous running, and no large forces are needed, so they don't need frequent impulses. In our Wingate test, our performers will have needed to recruit high amounts of fast twitch muscle fibers. They will have needed frequent impulses and large amounts of motor units to cycle fast and at high force. This graph shows the high power that the performer is working at, and we can see that they are constantly working at a high level of power throughout the whole test. The power is roughly maintained because of the fast frequent contractions of the fast glycolytic muscle fibers. It also shows us the resistance against the cyclist increases, more force is needed to overcome the resistance. Therefore, fatigue happens faster due to a buildup of lactic acid and carbon dioxide in the muscles. Muscle spindles detect changes in length and the speed of contraction happening to muscle fibers. They report the findings to the central nervous system via neurons, which are processed by the brain as proprioception. Proprioception is also known as kinesthetic sense, which is where you know what it feels like when you perform a movement correctly. The stretch reflex is a contraction in response to stretching within the muscle. When a muscle is stretched, elastic potential is stored inside it and is recoiled to increase the efficiency of the contractions. The stretch shorten cycle is an active muscle stretch followed shortly after with a contraction. The muscle spindles detect this stretch and send an impulse via a sensory neuron to the central nervous system. The central nervous system then sends an impulse via a gamma motor neuron, which is a motor neuron that takes part in muscle contraction. The impulse is sent back to the muscle and tells the extrafusal muscle fibers to contract. Extrafusal muscle fibers are our force-generating skeletal muscles and are innervated by alpha motor neurons, whereas intrafusal muscle fibers are found deep within the muscle and contain contraction elements as well as stretch receptors. The contraction is also known as reciprocal inhibition and helps to prevent the muscles from becoming injured. During plyometrics, the stretch reflex helps you become more powerful. As the muscles are stretched quickly, a more powerful explosive contraction becomes possible. Muscle spindle fibers make muscles contract, whereas Golgi tendon organs make muscles relax. Golgi tendon organs are types of proprioceptors and measure tension in the muscle fibers. It lies at the insertion of the skeletal muscle, and the intrafusal muscle fibers can preload muscles when anticipating a heavy load. This helps to prevent the overstretching of muscles. The inverse stretch reflex is a feedback mechanism which helps to prevent too much tension in the muscles and therefore reduces chance of injury. If the tension in the muscles becomes too high, this can cause a sudden relaxation of the muscles. Lastly, autogenic inhibition is the reduced excitability of a contracted or stretched muscle. During weightlifting, the biceps passively stretch, causing the triceps passively stretch, causing biceps to have an even stronger contraction. If the weightlifter tries to lift a weight that their muscles aren't ready to lift, then their muscles will have already preloaded, and when they pick up the weight, their muscles will quickly relax because of the reduced excitability in the muscles, resulting in them dropping the weight and possibly overstretching the muscle.